Hello and welcome to another sales chat. My name is John Golden from SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine, Pipeliner CRM, here in sunny San Diego, joined by my colleague who is in Vienna, Austria. Martha, give everyone a wave. Yeah. And our guest today is Tony Perzow, who's up in equally sunny Los Angeles, right?
Not too sunny this morning, though. Well, we're going into our June gloom, which is
exactly.
People are going to feel really sorry for us. But every June, we have cloudy skies until noon. Can you believe it? And then we get brilliant sunshine for the rest of the day.
I know. So don't expect anybody to be writing in with any sympathy or comments, because it's like when you complain in San Diego, you say, oh, you know, wasn't that great a day today? And people go, come on, you've got a 365-day summer there. Give us a break. Okay, well, Tony's a former negotiation trainer at the Carras organization, vice president and vice president negotiations training at Strategic Pricing Associates. And now Tony is a trainer, and he focuses on negotiation, and he trains people all over the globe, and this is his speciality. And we were just talking before we came on air how negotiation as a skill, maybe it has been overlooked a little bit over the last number of years, but people are starting to realize that it is actually a skill in itself. So that's what we're going to talk about today. If you want to join in the conversation on Twitter, it's hashtag SalesChats, that hashtag SalesChats. And or if you want to review the show again later, you can get it on salespop.net. Okay, so Martha's going to look after the Twitter chat. If you've got something to say, tweet away, and she will relay it to us. But okay, so Tony, let's just baseline this for a moment. Why is negotiations its own skill as opposed to just part of an overall kind of sales skill?
Well, it's first off, it's something that we do every day. Right, we're continuously negotiating, not only at work, but we're negotiating internally with our colleagues, with our bosses. We're negotiating with our wives. We're negotiating with our husbands, with our kids. We negotiate with ourselves. Should I have that extra cocktail tonight? Right there, and it's more than it's human dynamics. It's how do you deal with people, and not only how do you deal with people, but I call it how do you deal with people? How do you converse with people when that conversation is on steroids, right? So, I mean, really what negotiation is, it's two people conversing, or a group of people conversing with each other where they all have some sort of pressure to achieve some sort of goal, right? A leisurely conversation, when we were just talking about the weather and Venice Beach, there was no pressure on us to achieve anything. But in a negotiation, there's some sort of pressure that's usually hidden that we're trying to achieve something for ourselves or for our organization. So how do you converse with somebody with that pressure? And the truth is, really, 99% of people have no idea how to converse with people when under pressure. And here's the thing, and you should know this from your from your past experience, that most people think I'm going to swear here, their shit don't stink when it comes to negotiation. Most people think they're amazing negotiators. I don't know how many times I've done seminars, I've done tens of thousands of people have come through my rooms, and I don't know how many times I've heard people say this, Tony, I don't really need to be here, I'm from New York. You know how many times I've heard that? So the problem is twofold. First off, people think that they're amazing negotiators, and so they don't even bother going in for training. Secondly, leadership of our organizations think they're amazing, and they're the ones who come in at the last minute to try to save the day or save the deal, and they wind up giving massive concessions. So it starts off with the leadership. And then thirdly, or tertiary, people don't know how bad they really are at negotiation. If people realized how bad they really are, and it's not because they're innately bad, it's because most people have not acquired the skills. Most people have grown up in societies with fixed pricing where everything is easy, where you don't have to negotiate everything. Most people haven't taken an elective in school. Most people haven't taken a course on negotiation. So most people just don't know how to do it. So if they realize, so one of the first things that I do when I teach classes or I train companies, the first thing I do, everyone walks in because they're forced to be there. Their boss is them to be there. And the first thing I do is I give them a very easy one-off negotiation, and to very quickly show them that the choices they're making in this negotiation are the same choices they're making in the outside world, and they're making really poor choices. A lot of money left on the table. That's when people start waking up and they start listening to me. And then they open up this world, a big world of negotiation skill, which is a massive world, and there's so much to learn. And that's how I get to people. But off the bat, most people are not receptive to negotiation training because, first of all, they don't know what it is. Secondly, I think they're already pretty good at it because they got a good price on the TV at Costco.
No, exactly. I mean, that's a great way of putting it. And I don't think people are innately fantastic negotiators. As you say, I mean, all you probably need to do is take a look at all the choices you've made in your life and realize, you know, I've negotiated some good deals, but I've negotiated a lot of bad deals for myself. So maybe there's something in this. So with the modern buyer, what are some of the most effective negotiation strategies salespeople can use when talking to the modern buyer? Because let's face it, the buyers have evolved kind of rapidly over the last number of years. So we're in a kind of a different arena now.
Yeah. Well, so the modern buyer, I mean, I think salespeople have to be that much more skilled when dealing. It's a lot harder being on the sales side of a negotiation than it is on the buying side. And depending on what type of buyer you have, most commonly we're meeting buyers who are competitively negotiating. Their goal is to cut costs, get a better price. So you're dealing with very competitive negotiations with buyers, and buyers who might be using trickery, who might be using tactics, who might be somewhat manipulative. So first off, salespeople have got to learn how to competitively negotiate, which means they need to learn how to spot a lot of these buyer tactics and learn how to deflect a lot of them or not fall for them. So I think the modern sales, if you look at negotiation, it's massive, right? So there's competitive negotiating, which is basically how do you deal with transactional negotiations, price negotiations? How do you deal with an opponent who's trying to get a better deal for themselves and their company? So how do you deal with those type of negotiations? So salespeople need to become skilled in that area. But then there's also the collaborative negotiations, right? You're negotiating with relationships that matter. So how do you negotiate in that manner? How do you negotiate with long-term relationships, but not be a pushover?
Mm-hmm.
Right? Not give in. That's right. The important thing. You could be as nice as you want, but if you're giving in, if you're being a pushover, if you're making massive concessions, if you're saying yes too often, then it's not going to go too well for you. Mm-hmm. So how do you negotiate in a collaborative negotiation, but there still needs to be an aspect where there's a competitive component to that negotiation where you're still trying to defend your own interests. So how do you maneuver that, which is hard. And then, of course, there's the organizational kind of negotiation where you're dealing with a buyer, you're singing kumbaya with the buyer loves you, the buyer wants to say yes to you, but someone within the buyer's organization is saying no to them, or 100 people are saying no to them, or 75 people are saying yes, 85 people are saying no, and 4 people are maybes. How do you navigate the mess that often happens in organizations? So that's also a skill that salespeople need to navigate. And then, of course, there's the personal negotiation where you're dealing with someone who's just bringing all their baggage into the negotiation. They were burned on their last negotiation. They said, "I'm never going to be burned again," and they bring that mess into with you, or they're going through a reorg or something like that, right? And now they have a new boss looking over their shoulder, or they're about to go on vacation next week, or they just don't like you. You remind them of your ex-husband, their ex-wife. Now you're dealing with somebody who there's no rationale to the way they're dealing with. Right? They're looking at you through the lens of, for example, I have an ex-wife, and that's a continual personal negotiation because I can hand her a pot of gold and she'll still say that's a bad deal. I'm like, I'm giving you a pot of gold and she'll still hate me, right? So how do you navigate those type of situations? And I teach this stuff, and I'm awful at a lot of these things. Sometimes I'm like, why the hell did I do that or say that? So oftentimes salespeople have got to navigate all those different areas within one negotiation, right?
So let's take one example there. Say, okay, so if you're negotiating with somebody who is just fixated on price, right?
Yeah.
They have got this idea, and let's face it, a lot of buyers, and we're all guilty of this. We'll come in and you know, we take off our buyer hat and put on our seller hat, and we forget that we're ever buyers, and vice versa. But as buyers, we often go in and we go, I know, Tony, I know you have got room to negotiate here. I know you're not giving me the best price. How do you deal with somebody who's just fixated on price and is convinced that you have margin to give away?
Well, I mean, there's, you know, easier said than done. And I know this is a problem, but, you know, then I think it comes down to to sales skill, right? It comes down to, it's that old saying in negotiation: if you sell your value well, then a lot of negotiation issues will go away, will disappear. So there's truth to that, right? So, you know, if you've got to find a way to sway that buyer out of that price conversation, and you've got to get into your value. You've got to get into your sales process, into your differentiators. You got to be able to convince that buyer that you're not apples to apples in some way. But the worst thing, but I know buyers are trained, and I've trained them to do this, to go into negotiations and go in all transactional. Go in making it about price right off the bat. Get your salesperson talking price from the first second, and if you can do that, you've got leverage. You've got a very good chance of getting a better deal for yourself. That's why we see a lot of buyers trying to steer salespeople through email negotiation, right? Which is the thing for a salesperson. But it's very easy to keep the negotiation transactional when all through email. It's very hard to sell value through. Are you going to write a novel to your buyer? So salespeople have got to learn to get your buyer on the phone. Don't negotiate electronically. Really, you know, hone up your sales skills. Really figure out what your value is. Really try to figure out the pain points. All these old things maybe not everyone knows, but try to figure out. Ask a lot of questions. And try to figure out what's going on with your buyer. What are some of the pressures your buyer are under? And if you could start being a solution to 3 or 4 of those problems, then I firmly believe that you will see a lot of these price issues go away. But that's steering the ship.
Yeah, I was going to say, so it almost seems like if you've reached that point where it's just gone transactional and price oriented negotiation, you need to take a step back and look at what you've done up to then, as you say, about establishing the value. And maybe you need to take the sales process back a couple of steps and reinforce what the value was, reinforce what you're bringing to the table, and understand your buyer a little better, right? Maybe the pressures they're under, so you take it out of that arena and back to where the conversation should be.
Absolutely, and maybe even taking it a step back and coming down to your planning and preparation. And I know that one of your previous companies is a big believer in this, which is, you know, cross-functional planning for negotiations. So just don't leave it in the salesperson's hands to plan. Most salespeople are not planning for a negotiation. But you can start choosing which negotiations matter, right? Maybe all deals over $5 million, you put some sort of planning process into it, where you get a group of people, a team of people spending an hour with each other on a Zoom, Google Hangout, or in a room together, filling out a planning guide together, and then withholding the authority to negotiate before this plan is approved by some sort of C-suite executive. And then saying, now, salesperson, you have been blessed. You're now ready to go into this negotiation. I think if companies start taking an approach like that, we'll see a lot less of these price battles, and we'll start seeing organizations doing just a little bit better in their negotiations if they spend 60 minutes planning as a team for a negotiation. You can't let salespeople get in between their own ears. The worst place for a salesperson to be. But if you get other people saying, hey, how about this? What about this idea? How about this tradable issue? How about this way to grow the deal? What are our priority issues? What is our objective? The first question we need to ask, what the hell is our objective in this negotiation, right? Once you start with your objective, what are you trying to get out of this negotiation? Things start falling into place more, right?
Yeah. And I totally agree with you. I mean, I think the planning aspect of really understanding, you know, exactly to your point, what is negotiable, right? I mean, there are some non-negotiables in it, and maybe there are times when you need to walk away from a deal because the non-negotiables become or they try to become negotiable. What can you give away? What will you be happy with? And obviously, the other part is remembering, what does a good deal look like to you, right? Because otherwise you might end up negotiating, you might end up landing the deal, but when you reflect on it, you go, wow, that was a pretty horrible deal. And now I have made all these concessions or promises and that I have to fulfill. And guess what? If you do a proper margin analysis, it looks like, oh, maybe we're not even making money on it.
Yeah, if I just had an experience with a company I'm working with, and I advise everybody watching, just try this. I had all their salespeople for a couple of weeks fill in a planning guide before every single negotiation. And what we found out was pretty. The first thing was, so I had everybody say what your priority issues are in this negotiation, and what you think the priority issues are of the person you're negotiating with. And then for every priority issue, for example, price, write what you want to get, what you hope your desire is, what you expect to get, and what your walk away, what your exit point is. And I don't know how. And this was a $300 million company in revenue. Right. So these salespeople, there wasn't one salesperson who was less than 55 years old on the sales force. And I don't know, about 80% of these planning guides that I saw had salespeople saying, okay, well, my hope, my desire, my expectation is to get 8% margin on this price. That's my expectation. And then my best case scenario is also 8% margin. And so we have salespeople who are going in and they're just expecting less. They're just so if there was somebody who said, listen, I want to sign off on your planning guide before you negotiate, they would very quickly say, hey, Mr. Salesperson or Mrs. Sales Lady, why the hell are you going in aiming so low? Let's think about this. What's going on? What kind of tactics has the buyer used? What has the buyer said to you? We need to start getting into these kind of conversations.
Yeah. So is part of that then also on the salesperson's side is maybe they lack confidence in the negotiation process and have almost conditioned themselves to expect less. I mean, obviously, if you go in and say, my best case is 8%, my worst case is 8%, and my probable is 8%. Yeah. I mean, yeah. So how much of it do you think is the fact that, again, maybe the skill's not there, maybe the confidence isn't there, and maybe, if you set the bar low, let's face it, you got a better chance of clearing it, right?
Yeah, I mean, confidence just comes down to, lack of, when I first started training and I started going in front of 60, 70 people training, for the first 6 months, I wanted to vomit every single time I went in front of a group of people, right? And I spent so much time preparing. If I didn't prepare, I don't think I would have lasted. I would have ran away from this job that I have a long time ago. So salespeople need to prepare. And I think if salespeople start preparing and they start seeing the thoughts in their head going on paper and they get a little bit of coaching on it, and very easy coaching, and saying, hey, listen, maybe you should aim a little higher, or maybe your objective isn't right here, or maybe we should be contemplating this. I think salespeople will, or understanding what your power sources are, going through a list of all the different power sources in a negotiation and just pinpointing, okay, I got the power here. I have I call it a power ledger, and I have salespeople spend 10 minutes going through this, try to identify their power. And every single time they do it, they're amazed at how much power they actually do have in that negotiation that they didn't realize.
So can you just walk us through just quickly a couple of examples? The power ledger sounds interesting. So when in a just pick a sales scenario, what are some of the powers that a salesperson has that maybe they don't often recognize?
Well, it's I mean, one of them is motivation. Who's more motivated for the deal? And if you're aware of these power sources, then you start hearing things more clearly. For example, I was consulting with a company that put out this app that helps people in car accidents. You just take a picture and you send it off to the insurance company. And the buyer for this insurance company who was thinking about bringing in this technology was maybe a man in he was 63, 64, 65. And he said in the negotiation, he says, you know what? This is my swan song. I'm going to retire soon. I want this technology to be what I'm known for, right? I want to bring this to the company. So right there, I'm listening through the ears of a negotiator. And right there, I hear, wow, this buyer really wants this badly. All right. So I would say, well, we would get a little check there in motivation potentially. Understanding your BATNA, which best alternative to a negotiated agreement. Mm-hmm. So if you're trying to negotiate a job and you have 6 other job offers, you've got some leverage there, right? And if you got a skill that's very niche that no one else has, they might need you more than you need them. So you would have the power source there. The incumbent. So a lot of salespeople are renegotiating contracts. If you already got that deal and you've already been working with this company for a number of years and they're happy with you, they might threaten price. You better lower your price or we'll go to another vendor. Mm-hmm. Chances of that happening are very, very low, right? You've already got your foot in the door. Right. The price of change and retraining and it's just a big pain in the butt. So I would say salesperson, you probably got the leverage there. So you give yourself a little check. And there's about 12 of these items that you go through. And it doesn't take long to understand it. But I assure salespeople all the time, if you go through this list and spend 10 minutes going through this list and identifying where you might have the leverage or where your buyer might have the leverage, you'll realize that you have more power than you think you have. And that will force you to it will just force you, because you're going to see it with your own eyes, to go into your negotiations with a little bit more confidence and be less likely to discount so quickly or make some big concession because you think, oh, if I don't get this deal done, they're going to walk away. They might not walk away, right? So it's understanding those things.
So I think, it comes back to what you said earlier, and I think this is a recurring theme with sales in general, is the idea of planning, right? Because I often say is if you open the calendar of most salespeople, right, you will see appointment, maybe prospecting blocked off or whatever. But what you rarely see is a half hour maybe blocked off for planning for that call or planning for that negotiation. And I think that's a big gap, because as you say here, if you do this planning exercise, it can put you in a completely different headspace, right?
Yeah, let's face it, and I'm going to speak just in terms of negotiation. Mm-hmm. Most salespeople, very few that I've met, most of them are shooting from the hip. They're just going in there hoping for the best, shooting for the hip, and there's no process. And we're putting, and this is an awful thing to say, and organizations are putting their margins in the hands of people who are just not prepared, which I think is just ludicrous, which is just crazy. And they're all complaining, oh, we need to be making more money, we need better margins, we need better operating profit, blah, blah, blah. And I believe, of course I'm biased because I teach companies this, I believe that, put the margins in the hands of salespeople who are prepared, who know what they're doing. And also, you're also gonna see who shouldn't be a salesperson as well. There's a lot of salespeople out there in the world who shouldn't be salespeople, who shouldn't be even selling or even negotiating. So, I think we need to start cleaning up our sales teams and renovate. Maybe I should be the one who starts it. But there needs to be some sort of program where salespeople go through where they get licensed to be a salesperson, right? They get licensed. You must have had this thought before. Why isn't there? There might be some, but there could be.
Yeah, I think part of the issue is, and I think this is finally starting to change, is there's colleges like DePaul University in Illinois that has an undergraduate sales program run by Daniel Strunk. It's a phenomenal program. They learn, they do a full undergrad program, learn everything about sales, even learn how to use CRM, all of that stuff.
Oh, wow.
And they work with a number of companies, and those companies actually recruit from this program. And statistically now, the students who graduate and go to these companies actually stay there, do well, get promoted, because this is the first time we're really seeing professionalization coming in, and I think that's the key. And yeah, and maybe maybe you're not at a point now where you can go back to college and do an undergrad, but you can invest in yourself, and I think that's the key. Is you should want to professionalize yourself and learn. I often think there's when it comes to investing in ourselves, let's face it, we probably spend more time practicing our hobbies than we do practicing our jobs.
Absolutely, yeah. And it starts with leadership. I did a keynote speech for this company, and this has never happened before, where the CEO of the company said, "Can you fly down to Arizona and have lunch with me? I want to spend 3-4 hours with you, just going through the problems I'm having with my sale." And that's never happened before. And the first thing the CEO said to me says, "I suck at negotiating. I want to learn from you as well." So I think it takes some sort of humility from leadership to understand that maybe I'm not the best negotiator, and it starts off at the top, and maybe there's a few things I need to learn, and I think that will spread through the organization. So this company that I'm dealing with is just a prime example of leadership saying, "I need help," and now he's saying my whole sales force needs help as well. So,
all right. Well, this has been great, Tony. In the last couple of moments, what we always ask our guests is, can you share a power tip in terms of what do you do every day to set yourself, Tony, up for success?
Oh, wow. Oh, that's a good question. Well, I have like a morning ritual, which has become so I have priorities in my life, and above work and making money, and even I have 2 kids and 2 babies. I have a 4-year-old, 4.5-year-old, and a 3-year-old. And you might get some Twitter remarks on this, but even before they come, I got to take care of myself first. So I spend the first 2 hours of the day kind of taking care of myself. I have a meditation practice and that I have every morning, and without fail, I need to take care of that first before I go off on my day. So I'm not going to get too much because it's a very personal thing, but my recommendation to anybody is have some sort of ritual in the morning that makes you feel good, that makes you feel connected in some way, and that is that it's a great way to start off the day that kind of fuels you for the day. So I spend 2 hours. It doesn't need to be 2 hours, 1 hour, half an hour, 7 minutes, but something you do every day that is a practice. And that's the important thing, practice. Even in business and with negotiation, everything is a practice. You got to practice these skills every single day, and you got to practice taking care of yourself every single day, or it just kind of dwindles away. So,
absolutely. That's fantastic. Listen, Tony Perzow, just tell people quickly how they can learn more about you and contact you. The details will also be in the blurb, but go ahead and tell everyone.
Okay, well, let's see. So I get to plug something here. Well, TonyPerzow.com is my website. Tony@TonyPerzow.com is my email if you have any questions. And if you're in the Southern California area, June 13th and 14th, I'm doing a 2-day seminar workshop in Santa Monica. And you can go to that website at bit.ly/yousuckatnegotiating, bit.ly/yousuckatnegotiating. And for the first time, I'll be live streaming the entire event. So even if you're not in Southern California, you can watch the whole event through live stream, and I'll have 4 different cameras, so you'll really feel like you're part of the action. So anything else, I'm putting on an online course for salary negotiation soon. So if you email me, in fact, I'll give you a free tuition, I guess you can call it, to my salary negotiation online course. I'll be coming out in the next couple of months.
Excellent. You probably just sent a shiver down the spine of any managers who are watching. All right. My name is John Golden, SalesPOP Online Sales Magazine, Pipeliner CRM. My colleague Martha in Vienna, who's looking after the Twitter chat, and our guest Tony. We'll see you all for another sales chat really soon. Thank you.
Bye.